Hi, my name is Alex, and in this episode of Magic Missile Minis, I'm going to be giving you some tips and tricks on how to sculpt and paint spell effects. So, the first thing that I'm going to show you how to do is how to make a fire effect. And I start by having a finished hand and super gluing a wire to said hand. Generally having already bent the wire to the shape that I want the fire to be. Once that's dry, I hit it with a layer of liquid green stuff, but a layer of normal green stuff will do fine. Once the liquid green stuff has dried, I start to add normal green stuff in little strips, because what we're going to try to mimic is the tongues of flame that will be coming off of the hand. And something that's really important is you want to make sure that you're adding these tongues of flame and having them wrap around the hand. By the time you're finished the fire, you're going to want a little bit of the hand to show through. Otherwise, I wouldn't have told you to have the hand already sculpted on your mini. Having the hand finished isn't super important, but it can really make the fire effect look a lot cooler, because then you'll have the tongues of flame going in between the fingers and it'll look like it's kind of mingling with the hand and really sell the idea that this person is casting a spell. And again, the idea is you're going to get all of these little noodles of green stuff almost to act as the tongues of flame that are just going to be kind of spinning around the wire that you've added. And it should look something kind of like this when it's finished. And I'm primarily using the rubber sculpting tools to make it nice and smooth. Now what I'm going to show you how to do is the other spell effect I want to do in this video, and so that is the lightning effect. And so you're going to want to take the wire that was already a part of the armature and bend that into a zigzaggy shape, making sure that the zigzag isn't two-dimensional and it goes every which way. Keeping in mind you want all the bends in the wire to be more angular than curved. Once I've folded that wire to my heart's content, I go on and add a slightly thinner wire and wrap that around the wire that we're using for the lightning. And as you probably could have guessed, this is going to be the separate arcs of lightning that will be coming off of this guy. And unfortunately I forgot to film it, but you're also going to want to add some other bits of wire coming out directly from the hand, making sure you attach them well with glue or whatever, because one of mine I didn't attach very well, and you'll see later on that while I'm painting it, it actually falls off. And once all of those wires are securely in place, I go and add some liquid green stuff to them. And here's the tricky thing. I find that you probably could do this with normal green stuff, but the liquid green stuff adds a nice thin coat that is difficult to get with other stuff. But I feel like this is going to be the only time you really need to use liquid green stuff. So, now that we've finished sculpting the spell effects, we can go on to painting them. Starting with the fire effect, I add a base tone of a orangey yellowish, adding 3 or 4 thin coats since the color I'm painting it on is black. And I build that out until I have a nice whitish yellow. Then, as you can see me doing here, I go up the tongues of flame, going darker and darker the farther I go up, transitioning from a yellow to an orange to a red, and eventually I'm going to get to a black. And to get the transitions, as you can probably tell, I'm using wet blending, which for those of you who don't know, it's fairly self-explanatory. The paint is wet, and so that way you can blend the paints together. I then move on to paint the fingers that are kind of sticking out from under the flame. And I basically treat these the same way as I do the farthest part of the fire, starting out with a black and then going down with an orange and a red. Unfortunately, I forgot to film this part, but to finish the fire, you want to dry brush onto the lighter areas with a shade darker to make it look like it's glowing. After that, you can do what you've seen me doing here right now, which is the OSL. For those of you who don't know, OSL stands for Object Source Lighting, which is basically a fancy way of saying something that your mini is holding is giving off light. And so, because of the light that is being shed on the mini from the thing that it's holding, you need to be painting that color onto your miniature. And that way you make it actually look like what they're holding is shedding light. So the fire, I start by dry brushing the darkest color within the fire. So in this case, that is going to be a red. And that red color is going to reach the farthest in the little bubble of light that is being cast by the fire. And as you get closer to the fire, you simply follow the same gradient that is on the fire itself, getting lighter the closer you get to it. And that is your fire finished. However, the lightning needs to be done a little bit differently, so I'm going to show you how to do that now. As you can see, I start with a base coat of white, although I feel like that was a fairly obvious next step. And then once that white is completely dry, you actually take a light blue and you want to dry brush on all of the lightning. But you don't want it to be too heavy because you want the primary color of the lightning to still be the white. And then once you do the dry brush on the lightning, you can go ahead and add a dry brush to all the places where the light of the lightning is going to touch. The light of the lightning is going to be a lot brighter than the light of the fire. So wherever it touches, the light is going to be a brighter color. So we're not going to have like a deep blue OSL on this. And that means it's going to spread out farther. So as you can see here, I'm actually dry brushing onto the entirety of the cloak that's being kind of swung open. But for this bright lightning, just doing a dry brush isn't going to quite cut it. I find that you want to also go over any of the brightest points with a glaze of that same color you were using to dry brush. For those of you who don't know, glazing is basically a technique where you take a very watered down paint, apply it where you want the gradient that you're making to be the brightest, and then take another dry brush and spread that paint into a gradient. If you ever need to get a really nice smooth gradient and you're not using an airbrush, this is the way to do it. And so when you're done with the glazing of the blue, you move on and do the same technique with a white paint in all of the brightest areas, using the same glazing technique that we did before. Having this bright white highlight is going to really help emphasize the idea of just the kind of flash of lightning. And once you've finished with your last highlight of white, you can move on to base the miniature and then it's finished. Thank you so much for watching that video. I hope it gave you some insights in how to sculpt fire and lightning. If you enjoyed that video, please leave a like, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell icon. All that stuff is super helpful for a small channel like myself. Anyways, once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.